is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A dark streak in turquoise waters triggered a state of environmental emergency in Mauritius when a Japanese bulk carrier ran aground on a reef a mile off the Mauritian coastline. At least 1,000 tons of fuel oil spilled into pristine and protected waters, endangering delicate marine life and presenting unprecedented challenges to a country where tourism is a big income earner. So what events led up to this ecological disaster? And what impact has it had on the environment and the local economy? And how does the journey to recovery look like for Mauritius in the aftermath of the MV Wakashio oil spill? I'm Beatrice Marshall. Welcome to Talk Africa. The MV Wakashio oil spill is now being cited as Mauritius's worst and only disaster of such scale. Let's first take a look back at events that followed in the immediate aftermath of the bulk carrier's grounding at the Indian Ocean island.
On July 25th, the Japanese-owned ship MV Wakashio ran aground off the southeastern coast of Mauritius, an island in the Indian Ocean. Reports indicate the Mauritius Coast Guard tried numerous times to contact the vessel about sailing too close to shore. Despite repeated warnings, the captain of the Wakashio continued on his path until the vessel became grounded on a reef near the shoreline. While the cargo ship was empty of cargo, it was carrying 200 tons of diesel and 3,800 tons of bunker fuel. There were also 20 crew members on board. All were safely rescued. For 2 weeks, the Wakashio sat grounded in the coral reefs. It was the persistent battering waves that eventually cracked its hull open, causing it to begin leaking engine fuel on August the 6th. On August the 7th, the Mauritius Prime Minister declared a state of emergency and appealed for help to the French President Emmanuel Macron, who offered military support dispatched from the nearby French Reunion Island to extract the remaining fuel in the ship. As of Monday, August the 10th, about 1,500 tons of oil have leaked from the Wakashio. This is endangering not only protected habitats, but also the local economy, which depends on fishing and tourism. On the same day, during a news conference in Tokyo, Akihiko Ono, the executive vice president of Mitsui OSK Lines, which owns the Wakashio, apologized for the spill and, quote, "the great trouble we have caused." The Japanese Foreign Ministry also pledged to dispatch a 6-person emergency response team to Mauritius to assist with cleanup efforts. In the meantime, Mauritian environmentalists, coastal residents and volunteers have worked together to assemble and deploy homemade floating booms made mostly of sugarcane bagasse and empty plastic bottles sewn together with homemade netting in the hope of preventing the oil from spreading further. As of August the 11th, it seems industrial booms have finally arrived from France and are being dispatched. These booms are specifically engineered to contain oil spills. Many currently believe that slow government response and rough seas have turned a relatively minor oil spill into a potential ecological and economic disaster. Amidst the various cleanup and containment efforts, it seems the oil had spread as far up the island's eastern coast, a popular resort island. There, one can now find oil-covered mangrove swamps that serve as critical habitat for plants, insects, and birds endemic to Mauritius. Jin Kyo, CGTN.
Well, cleanup efforts have been underway in Mauritius' southeastern coastline as teams ranging from local volunteers to international experts swoop in to contain the oil spill. CGTN's Liu Feifei has been covering the developments and brings us some of the latest updates.
Now what you see behind me right there, That's the back section of the Wakashio, what is also called the stern section or the engine room. And that is about 30 meters long, although it looks really big out at sea. It's 30 meters out of the ship that's actually 300 meters long. Now, where is the rest of it? The rest of it, 270 meters of it, in fact, has been dragged out to sea by the salvage masters. It's gone about 13 nautical miles into the Indian Ocean, and that translates to about 25 kilometers, where it's going to have a planned sinking. Now, this is the final consensus reached by the team of international experts under the leadership of the Mauritius government. As government authorities and international experts are reaching consensus on how to dispose of the ship, many questions remain. Particularly, people are still wondering what allowed the ship to sail so close to the Mauritius coastline in the first place, and what kind of criminal charges are going to be filed by the captain and crew. The investigation is being led by the Mauritius Central Criminal Investigation Department, and in fact the captain and his second in command have both been arrested, provisionally charged, and detained. What they've been charged under is the Mauritius piracy law, and they've been charged with endangering safe navigation. Another big question that is top of mind for a lot of people, particularly the local residents who've currently been banned from partaking any water-related activities, including fishing, which some of them rely on for their daily livelihoods, is the claims and compensation process. Generally, there would be a legal process including the ship owner and the ship insurer, but we've been told that this process is usually very timely and costly. So it's better to try to agree on a process going forward between the aggrieved and the ship owner and the ship insurer. Of course, this is going to be a huge number that we're looking at, because you can imagine for all the people that are living here, they're going to be looking for compensation as to their livelihoods being disrupted. There's currently, as I mentioned, a ban on all water-related activities. Addition to that, there is also going to be government costs. There's been helicopters flying on and off the boat for the past month, non-stop, and that's going to be a huge cost, in addition to all of the other cleanup efforts to date. And that's not even including the cost of the eventual cleanup. And so we've been told, like the comprehensive recovery and cleanup effort and the criminal investigations, this claims process is also complex, and it's also going to take a lot of time.
Well, let's expound this discussion, and I'm now joined by Dr. Scott Edwards. He's in Bristol for us. He's a lead author at the Safe Seas Network with research interests in maritime security and interstate cooperative mechanisms. Also joining us via Zoom in Mauritius is Davina Obelak. She's the co-owner of Scuba World Diving Center in Maheburg and a representative of tour operators in the areas affected by the oil spill. Thank you both for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Davina, let's get your understanding from where you are, because you're based in Mauritius here. You talked about on Friday there was a dark covering the ocean. What is the situation like now?
The situation now is that, yes, when you go all over the southeast coast, you can see that the water is blue, but I'm not an expert in that, but for sure, I don't think that this blue water is a real blue water, because the proof is that, for example, yesterday, we are still doing the end of the work, is like all the artisanal booms that we have placed in water with a voluntary boat of the people who live here at Maheburg. We are finishing the work by removing all these artisanal booms. And one of the boats yesterday came because the day before, when he went at home, he cleaned the boat, washed everything. It's a white color boat. And yesterday morning, he come here with a very clean boat. Everything was washed. And by the end of yesterday, the boat was dirty again. Full of oil everywhere. So despite despite seeing a blue lagoon in front of us, me personally, I don't think it's a blue lagoon. It's still contaminated for me.
All
and
right.
I don't know what the local authorities is waiting for to start this next step to let us know how much is it still contaminated and for how many years we are not going to be able to use this lagoon. So we are still waiting for this answer today, and we are still without answer today.
Dr. Edwards, that is the question, though, because Davina talks about the efforts the local community has done to clean the lagoon, but the government itself activated its national oil spill contingency straight after. Dr. Edwards, what are your thoughts on the government's response to that incident, particularly looking at it in relation to other spills around the world?
I think with Safe Seas, we've been advocating for a kind of independent investigation and an independent review of how the government put its measures in place, because there's still a lot of questions surrounding the government response and the kind of effectiveness of it. The primary one essentially being that they're very slow to react. It kind of showed that the importance of speed was very important in this case, because the ship was essentially sitting there for 2 weeks, and the company that had been employed in order to clear it hadn't necessarily done what they were employed to do. The contract to refloat the vessel had been met. So there's a lot of questions around why the government was unable to speed this up, why the government was lacking equipment. And this is especially important considering that Mauritius has gained external funding in the past from various bodies in order to kind of reinforce and strengthen its responses to the oil spills. And I think just prior to this event, it was probably seen as one of the kind of poster boys of oil spill capacity, a government who would be able to respond to the issue. And I think that's what they originally felt. But then because of the kind of slow speed that is put into effect, it kind of raises a lot of questions around what was the coordination like between the salvaging company and the government? What was the coordination like between the government and the owners of the vessel? And even on the ground, so what was coordination like between various authorities on the government? And as Davina has been talking a lot about, you know, volunteers and NGOs who have come in to help, also how are the government been working with them in order to ensure that this response is effective? So I think at the moment it's very difficult to assess how the government has been doing, but we need this kind of individual investigation in future to kind of work out and answer these questions and then learn these lessons so that they can apply to other cases and other oil spills as well.
All right, Dr. Edwards, but in your view, though, what would an effective response look like?
So for us, an effective response would be a much speedier response. I know that there was questions around the weather, but there's definitely questions around whether the salvaging company was able to, was doing what it was saying it was able to do, and whether there were other alternatives in kind of place as well. So whether the government had considered different alternative companies, or whether they'd just listened to ship owners who are often looking for a more economical than kind of holistic approach to this. So for us, it'd be a much speedier response, well informed. And I think this also raises questions around regional coordination. One of the things that we've been researching in the past is how different regional bodies and different regional organizations can help one another when it comes to maritime disasters like this, or maritime insecurity and various issues. And there has been some regional kind of approaches towards thinking about oil spills.
Right.
There's meant to be the Regional Marine Pollution Coordination Centre was meant to be established. There's meant to be kind of more West Indian Ocean joint projects, but these haven't really come to the fore, and they haven't really like contributed to Mauritius's capability. So for us, it'd be a speedier response with strong coordination between agencies on the ground, domestic agencies, but also regional agencies as well.
All right. Davina, I want to find out how you have been personally affected, because you talked about being there for the cleanup, your business being there for the cleanup. What's been the actual impact for yourself as a business person?
the thing is that recently there is the COVID-19 season. We were still affected before with that problem. And at this moment, the airport is still closed. So since March, all the people related to the tourism industry is affected. And what is crazy is that above that now we have this Wakashio problem in this southeast coast. And as I told you, it came here in one of the biggest lagoon and one of the most well-known lagoon for its history, for its beautiful marine life. So there is so much here in this lagoon that is part of the Mauritius history. And now from the restricted zone, so it's started at Le Chalon, it's next to the airport, and it goes to a village called Trou de Douce. So from that part to the island to Trou de Douce village, it's restricted zone. That is, none of the people are allowed to come there, to work there, to fish there, or to swim there. And also, along this coast, there are a lot of activities. For example, myself, we have a diving center. There are speedboat trip, snorkeling, windsurf school, catamaran, glass bottom boat. There's a discovery of the island. There are lots of islands nearby us. So you cannot imagine how all these people today is living in a stress because we don't know what will happen in the coming days or the coming week or the coming years.
Right.
And the bad news of yesterday was that the government say that for all people affected with the Wakashio situation will have a compensation of 10,200 rupees per month. This is very, very ridiculous for us because the investment behind the expenses, personal or business expenses, we will not survive with this.
Our conversation continues in a minute. We'll take a short break now, but do stay tuned. Talk Africa continues in a moment.
Life moves pretty fast. Ideas move at the speed of sound. Technology moves at the speed of light. If you don't filter out the noise, you might miss the details. We pay attention to the details because they matter, showing you a different perspective. See the difference.
Welcome back to Talk Africa. Well, still with me, joining us via Zoom are Dr. Scott Edwards in Bristol and Davina Obeluk in Mauritius. Well, Dr. Edwards, Davina has talked about the compensation for the community, compensation that the government will be giving the community, about 10,200 rupees there. But in terms of liability, Mauritius has said it will seek compensation for the leak from the owner and the insurer. Take us through the process of redress and compensation in such a situation as the MV Wakashio oil spill.
So I think based on other oil spills, I think in this case, there has been some degrees of simplicity in terms of the ship owners are easily identifiable. I think they've kind of come forward and said they will meet their obligations and the international law when it comes to compensation. So I'm sure their insurers will as well. But kind of based on other oil spill litigation cases, this compensation can take an extraordinarily long amount of time to reach the government. it's not by any means a quick process. We've seen this in the past, like years and years have passed before any sort of compensation does actually reach the government or the people affected by the disaster. And also another issue that kind of comes up, which we have touched upon slightly, is that it's very difficult just to quantify how much compensation should be awarded, because it's very difficult to measure the economic loss. It's very difficult to measure like the loss of kind of marine life, the impact on habitat, the impact on the wider kind of ecology in Mauritius. So it's a very complex area. It's a very complex kind of process. So I think that it will be kind of a very long process in this case as well, unfortunately. And also, so just to add on to that quickly, I mean, in other oil spill cases, this can actually be more complicated because quite often the ship owners aren't as easily identifiable. The shipping industry is not particularly a transparent industry. So in some cases, it can be hard to find who should be getting the money from and who's kind of liable for the money. But then even this case demonstrates, or I think will demonstrate, that even when you do recognize who those people are and they have come forward saying that they will meet the obligation, that process is still extremely drawn out to the point where it's not going to be of much benefit to the people of Mauritius, especially at the moment, and maybe even to the mid to long term, whilst they're waiting for that compensation to occur.
Davina, in terms of the cleaning up effort, because you know the local community itself also turned up to do some cleaning up of the oil. What are you seeing today? What kind of cleaning up efforts are undergoing today? And is there a time frame from the government as to when the lagoon will be usable again?
So as I told you, since Friday, we have tried our best to limit this disaster. We only use these artisanal booms to absorb as much as it can. And I can tell you that the result today is guaranteed. But as I told you, the water is still contaminated. But now we are still waiting for the next step. That is, if Mayberg Lagoon is still clear today, but in the other village after Mayberg, like Bois des Amourettes, Vieux Grand Port, Anse-Joncé, Bambou-Verrieux, all these villages are still in a bad situation. And the most bad thing is that the mangrove is badly affected. Now, the latest information we had from the authorities is not to go and clean because we cannot do so as we do not know how to do it. So they told that very soon some training will be on. They will explain how to go and clean a beach, how to clean a mangrove, but today we are still waiting for that.
All right, so Davina, seeing what you're seeing now, and of course you have a lot of questions, you know, as you go through the cleanup process and looking at the businesses of the Mauritian people. What would you like to see happen though, moving forward regarding oil spills or regarding this particular incident, Davina?
We would really like to have a meeting with the concerned authority, the Ministry of Tourism, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Health. As Scott said, I know that the other part regarding the claim, this will take years and years. We are not looking forward for that. Our priority now is tomorrow. So we would like to have the answers of what happened, or I think that all Mauritians are waiting for that. What happened? For how many years are we not going to be able to go back to work? Because we are passionate people and we love what we do. A skipper, he loves bringing his guests and make him visiting this beautiful bay. An instructor, a scuba instructor or a diver, his passion is to bring people underwater and visit this beautiful lagoon. So we are waiting. We would like to have answer now. I think it's time for Mauritian people to have answer now. We would like to know exactly what happened. What is our future? Because we are all reaching by the end of August, and many people now are still with a big question mark. What will happen? We are all families, we have children, so what will happen? So it's very important now that we have a meeting with these people concerned and sit together and talk about these issues. I think it's a must now.
Dr. Edwards, so the authorities are trying to determine how and why this incident happened. What lessons are we learning, though, from this oil spill in Mauritius to avert a future incident?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of lessons to be learned, and I kind of keep harping on about it. Like, these lessons will become clearer were there to be more degrees of transparency around some of the questions we have around the issue. But there are definitely some lessons to be learned in terms of the speed of the response, just how quickly can governments coordinate the various bodies involved. So I mentioned earlier the shipping company, the salvaging company, the various kind of maritime authorities in Mauritius. So I think a lesson for us there, and one that we have done research on in the past, is just the importance of coordination between different bodies so that you can have that faster response and that more effective response. I think the other lesson to be learned here is in terms of like how the regional kind of bodies can do more and regional organizations can help one another more. So with Mauritius, obviously being like a small island state and having various issues in terms of capacity, then if the region is able to kind of fill some of those gaps, if the region can work together to reinforce the capacity to respond to these issues. So I mentioned earlier with the pollution coordination response to the pollution coordination center, and things like that, where you can pick up on these issues quicker, you can mobilize various capabilities and various people and agencies from around the region to help out at a much faster response. So I think that this has definitely raised questions around coordination. It's definitely raised questions around capability and how that's being delivered, how capacity building is delivered and what capacity is chosen. And I think those are lessons that should be taken forward in future. So governments should have proper plans in place, but there should also be more planning on how to implement those plans. There should be more equipment, whether that's provided from external funders or from the government itself. And there should also be regional support when thinking about these various issues as well.
All right, very insightful discussion indeed. And that's all we have time for this week on Talk Africa. Thank you to our guests for your insights. Dr. Scott Edwards in Bristol is a lead author at the Safe Seas Network, and Davina Oberluk, the co-owner of Scuba World Diving Center in Maheburg and a representative of tour operators in the areas affected by the oil spill, both joining us via Zoom. And thank you for tuning into the program. We'd love to hear your feedback on this topic through our social media handles on Facebook and Twitter. And you can catch this and more episodes of Talk Africa on the CGTN Africa website and our YouTube playlist. See you again next week from me, Beatrice Marshall. Goodbye.